Hello everyone. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. There has been a lot of talk recently about the safety and efficacy of the Bayer Seresto collar, thanks to a USA Today article published on March 2nd. And today we're going to dive right into this controversy and try to make some sense of it. First, let's take a look at the product. The Seresto collar is a flea tick collar for dogs and cats that provides 8 months of protection. Its active ingredients are imidacloprid and flumethrin, and it is available through veterinary clinics and online retailers. About a week ago, this headline was all over social media, prompting hundreds of phone calls to veterinary clinics from concerned pet parents. This article, published by USA Today, detailed the story of Pierre, a 9-year-old Papillon who suffered a seizure following the application of a Seresto collar, implying that the collar was to blame. The article highlighted other reports related to Seresto collars, including a 67-year-old woman with heart arrhythmia and a 43-year-old man with a ruptured eardrum. The article accuses the Environmental Protection Agency of covering up these incidents and not warning pet owners of the risks. But before we jump to conclusions, let's take a closer look at the claims made in the article. Let's first examine the main feature of the article, the death of Pierre, a 9-year-old Papillon. Pierre, with reportedly no history of seizures, experienced a seizure the day after a Seresto collar was put around his neck. Upon seeing her dog collapse, Pierre's owner called the police. The article states that the officer helped her lift the dog into her car so that he could be taken to an emergency clinic for care. Our first question is, why did an officer have to help the owner lift a Papillon, whose average weight is 7 to 9 pounds, into the car? Perhaps it was just a poor choice of words, but it left many readers scratching their heads. The article fails to provide detailed information on Pierre's prior medical history, too. When was his last vet exam? What did his blood work, i.e. organ function, look like prior to the application of the collar? The article also fails to conclude whether the Seresto collar played a role in this dog's death, since no necropsy results were shared. Next, we move down to the other incidents reported to the EPA. The article states that a 67-year-old woman who slept in a bed with a dog wearing a collar reported having heart arrhythmia and fatigue, yet fails to explain how the collar was tied to the symptoms. The ingredients in the Seresto collar, imidacloprid and flumethrin, are unlikely to cause heart-related issues, and it is not exactly unheard of for a 67-year-old individual to develop heart issues. Again, we are given no prior medical history. A spokesperson for Elanco, Carrie McGrath, said this about the Seresto collar. 1 in 568 users of Seresto will have an incident, and the majority of these incident reports related to non-serious effects such as reddening of the skin or hair loss below the collar. She also brings up the important point that correlation does not prove causation. Let's take a look at the clinical trials for Seresto. In a 2012 study, Seresto was compared to a control collar to examine its safety and efficacy. The Seresto collar was proven to be statistically superior to the control collar for the prevention of flea and tick infestations. Both the Seresto collar and the control collar were proven to be safe in dogs and cats, with only minor local observations at the application site. In case you're interested, here is a quick look at this study. A link to this study will also be provided at the end of this video and in the description. An article written by Lisa Wogan was recently published on the Veterinary Information Network. In this article, the author shared a response on the USA Today article from Dr. Tina Wismer, the medical director of the ASPCA Animal Poison Control Center. Dr. Wismer mentions the randomness of the health issues reported to the EPA in relation to the Seresto collar. She explains that the randomness of these issues, ranging all over the body, hints that the collar is not likely to be the cause. She further explains that a poison tends to elicit the same signs along a continuum. In the case of ibuprofen ingestion in dogs, we see vomiting, stomach ulcers, and kidney failure, but it's the same progression in every animal. The VIN article also shared the thoughts of Dr. Sharon Gwaltney Brant, another toxicology consultant. She also expresses doubt over the validity of the reports made to EPA and mentions that even when ingested, the toxicity of the Seresto collar is extremely low. She goes on to say that just as some humans cannot wear certain cosmetic brands, certain animals may develop a hypersensitivity to one of the ingredients in the collar. That is not necessarily a toxicosis, just an individual hypersensitivity. A link to this VIN article will also be shared at the end of this video. This lack of conclusive information highlights the ever-important statistical reminder: correlation does not prove causation. This simply means that just because two events are correlated, it does not prove that one caused the other. The presence of a Seresto collar during the occurrence of adverse events is not conclusive proof of the collar's harm. We must look at clinical trials and the research behind the product to create an overall image of the safety and efficacy of a product. It is also important to note that we cannot use anecdotal evidence as justification one way or the other. One person may say that they've used Seresto collars on their dogs for years without any adverse effects. While that may be true, this is an example of anecdotal evidence, which must be rejected on principle due to the lack of a large sample size, creating an unreliable interpretation of the causality between two variables, and the inability to disregard potential confounding variables. That being said, anecdotal evidence cannot be used against the product either. While Pierre's death is heartbreaking and devastating for the owner, his story is not representative of the overall safety and efficacy of the Seresto collar. To reiterate, anecdotes cannot be used to establish causal relationships. Only controlled, repeatable, and peer-reviewed laboratory studies can form conclusive evidence for or against a product. Due to Seresto's popularity, there are numerous counterfeit products available online that look almost identical to the Bayer Seresto collar. It is unclear if any of the reports made to EPA can be attributed to counterfeit collars, but it is certainly plausible. I would recommend purchasing directly from your veterinarian to ensure you are getting the real thing. Lastly, I want to stress this point very clearly. Veterinarians would not purposefully sell you a product that is likely to cause harm to you or your animal. While adverse reactions can happen with anything, veterinarians would not recommend a product if it, 1, was not effective in clinical trials, and 2, had a high probability of causing harm to the patient. Veterinarians receive no benefit or kickbacks from pushing Seresto collars. In fact, a Seresto collar is currently one of the cheapest options on the market for 8-month-long effective flea tick prevention. In actuality, veterinarians could make more money if they pushed other products. As pet owners, we only want what's best for our furry family members. This article, though sensationalized in my opinion, has ignited the passions of thousands of pet owners, and it's a beautiful thing to see. However, before we abandon ship on Seresto collars, it is important for us to examine each of these claims critically. If you have any concerns about any type of flea tick prevention, I encourage you to speak directly to your veterinarian to discuss the right options for your pet.